English translation 583rd Contact Wednesday, the 19th of March 2014, 9:36 hours.
There you are, my friend. I was still in deep sleep when you called me. What is so important that you come today? Because Florina informed me that you and Quetzal want to come tomorrow. Is Quetzal also coming today? And what is it about tomorrow because of the correction?
Quetzal has come here with his own flying apparatus and has been on the site for quite some time to inspect everything. Because it is important for him to see what has happened since his last visit a year ago regarding the regrowth of the damaged bushes and trees. He also wants to take another close look at the whole bush and tree area and see what has happened in the meantime with the recovery and regrowth of the mutilated bushes and trees. He also wants to explain what needs to be done urgently and where and how to help with the pruning of the bushes and trees, if pruning is necessary on one or the other bush or tree. But it will certainly not be long before he will appear here. And of course I will come to the correction work tomorrow anyway.
Oh, so I do not have to make the rounds with him. In that case, we can talk about a few things. Here I have something that I have put into the computer. Since the time of Ascot until the new millennium, we have talked about the Tunguska catastrophe on various occasions, and I have found, as I have looked up, in the Pleiadian-Playaran contact reports, for example, that there's a lot of things that I would like to share with you. For example, in the following conversation reports, 31st report, from 17th of July 1975, Volume 1, pages 311 to 312. 365th report, Volume 9, pages 283 to 286 from the 20th of August 2004. 428th report, Volume 10, from the 10th of July 2006, sentences 11 to 32, etc. It was also explained that all the people from whom the spaceship that exploded over Tunguska came emigrated to another galaxy on other planets. Now there are new things concerning the Tunguska matter, like the following, which Occam Wolf from Germany has sent me.
Subject: Tunguska catastrophe.
In Sim Ya Say Block 27, Billy talked to Patar about the so-called Tunguska catastrophe, or the nuclear explosion of the spaceship in 1908. Some reports and speculations on the internet come surprisingly close to the truth. There was demonstrable radioactive radiation at that time. Eyewitnesses even reported the shape of an object. Maybe the information is interesting for Billy. Example 1. The Baskir engineer and geophysicist A.V. Solotov examined splinters of trees that had survived the catastrophe by cutting them into annual rings, then burning them and analyzing the ashes. He found a general increase in radioactivity for the year 1908 by finding the radioactive isotope cesium-137 in the wood. Thermal damage to the trees, complex biological effects such as accelerated growth and somatic mutations, changes in the paleomagnetic properties of the soil, thermoluminescence of the rock, increased uranium content in trap samples igneous rock, and anomalies on a global scale were detected. They are declared as consequences of the disaster. In the disaster area, the growth of pine trees with 3 needle tufts, probably a mutation as a result of the disaster, was concentrated. The flight of the alleged Tunguska object was observed over a large territory, even in places 500 kilometers from the epicenter. Over 800 eyewitnesses have been found over the years who saw the object and in some cases heard its sound. The Tunguska body was described flying from south to north. However, no agreement was found between the observations in the south and west and those in the east, because then the Tunguska body would have had to move on 2 different trajectories at different speeds. According to this, a constellation could result, according to which either A. the statements are not correct, B. it is two different flying objects, C, or the body in question changed its flight path and speed. In the latter case, it would have had to move on a non-ballistic trajectory with changing azimuths and heights, which is impossible for a natural body. Kazantsev went a step further in his hypothesis of a nuclear explosion and said that an interplanetary spacecraft visiting Earth and using nuclear energy as its propulsion, for some reason, crashed over the Taiga, exactly where Kulik's expeditions had so unsuccessfully searched for the remains of the meteorite. Example 2. What happened in the summer of 1908 in Siberia? What event still puzzles the experts after more than 90 years? According to many eyewitness reports, on this last day in June, a brightly glowing object descended from the sky for about 10 minutes. It glowed in a bluish-white light and was usually described as tubular. As the body descended, a cloud of black smoke formed and a roar resembling cannon fire sounded. A column of light at least 20 kilometers high was also seen. The heat that caused the explosion was so intense, even at a distance of 65 kilometers, that a farmer tore off his shirt because he thought it was on fire. The shock was so strong that seismographs around the globe recorded unusual deflections. The explosion could still be heard 700 kilometers away. Best regards, Achim Wolf, Germany.
The article is interesting, but it will probably be of no use to the know-it-alls and doubters who will continue to cling to their confused ideas and conceptions.
Then we can talk about some things that interest me and about what, greetings and welcome, Quetzal, my friend.
Greetings and welcome to you also. And at the same time, I want to apologize to you for my abrupt departure and my behavior during my last visit on the 30th of April last year. Note Billy, 559th contact, because I was angry and very upset. This because the bushes and trees throughout the center grounds have been so badly damaged by radical pruning that they need years to regenerate, which is why I also ordered that no further pruning should take place for 3 years. Now, however, after examining the bushes and trees, I am also annoyed again today because, as I found out, they did not act according to my instructions. But again, destructive pruning was carried out on various bushes, shrubs, and espalier plants. Today, however, I am better able to control my emotions than I was a year ago, when I was very angry and frightened, so I would like to express myself in a more objective manner. Whoever violated my order and carried out the damaging circumcisions.
It was also my fault, because I only found out afterwards what was wrong, which happened again.
But I do not think it could also be your fault, because as Ptah told me, you wrote down the reports of the conversations and distributed them among the members, and you also personally pointed out that there should be no more circumcisions for 3 years. Except for the bush on the edge of the meadow opposite the front door, as well as the bush higher up in Bungert and the birch tree at the corner of the shed. I gave you clear instructions on how the pruning should be done, which was also followed correctly under your supervision. But my instructions were clear and precise and stated that no other pruning should be done, which was unreasonably ignored, which again destroyed some things and left little chance for recovery. Bushes and trees of any kind must never be pruned in the radical way that has taken place and damaged by this, but only clearing pruning may be carried out if necessary, which means that only clearings and real wild growth pruning may be carried out. But this must be such that it cannot be seen that pruning has taken place. But what has been done again is the same as the first time, and only makes a difference in that this time not as much has been destroyed as the first time. On the other hand, I explained that dried branches on bushes and trees should be cut off, and I let you explain about where and how this should be done. So now I order that from now on my instructions are strictly followed, and that from today on, another 3 years are to be observed before new pruning is allowed. And from now on, such circumcisions may only be carried out if I order this personally, which can also be done through Ptah, if I instruct him and he can show you where and what is to be done. Florina and Anjana, as well as Ptah or others, will take pictures of all trees, bushes, and shrubs in the center area at the correct time and present them to me. I will also make a personal effort to make regular visits, and will also instruct you personally or through Ptah where and how to prune any bushes, trees, and shrubs, after which the persons who are ordered to prune them will have to follow your instructions exactly. And when the time comes, I will come back here and walk with you personally through the grounds to instruct you what is to be done about pruning bushes, shrubs, and trees. Nothing else can and must be done in the future, because the damage that has been done is more than can be justified.
That is clear. But then what about so-called rejuvenation pruning? Because I have procured some books on this subject, also generally for the pruning of bushes, shrubs, and trees.
The descriptions in such books, some of which I also possess from earthly writers, must be approached very carefully, for different views prevail, some of which are very dubious and tend to do more harm than good. So you should not simply rely on such bleed descriptions. Especially regarding rejuvenation cuts, there is a lot of nonsense written in such books, which does more harm than good.
Actually, I was going to try to get courses on pruning trees, bushes, and shrubs. There are also courses for caretakers, etc. What do you think about this?
Nothing really, because I know that such courses are not given by real professionals who are busy with this work every day during pruning times. Only real professionals can really give professional advice and, of course, be instructive.
So that means that we are best guided by your explanations and instructions, which I think is acceptable.
Which I also stipulate.
My word on it, and I will endeavor to ensure that everything is complied with on all sides.
Then, when you and Ptah have finished your conversation, I would like you to come with me in my flying apparatus. Because I want to show you a few things from above, especially in the garden, which is completely disfigured above the road opposite the old milestone. It takes about 15 minutes to look at everything and explain to you what is to be done.
You can go now because I will wait.
This is good, it will not take long.
Regarding the garden, Freddie has taken over the garden from Connie and is now in the process of redesigning it and also building a seating area in it.
Hence the mess. Are you familiar with his ideas?
Some I know of, yeah.
Then you can explain it to me when we are in the flying apparatus.
Then go now, because I do not want to say goodbye yet, Edouard, dear friend. We will have a lot to talk about. So I will wait until you get back.
Then let us go now.
Well, but I guess that way I will not have to call up and write down everything you explain to me later, right?
That will not be necessary. When we have looked at everything together, and I have explained everything to you, I will not come back to your workroom, but leave right away.
And me?
Your question is illogical.
Oh, so you will beam me back.
Of course. Then let us go now.
Here I am again, Ptah. According to my watch, it took longer than 15 minutes.
The time was short for me because I turned on the computer and read in your new book you are writing.
And what do you think of it?
What I read is very interesting and good.
Thanks, but can I ask you something right now?
Of course.
About that which I would once like to hear your professional view, lies in the following question. Can you tell me in short and simple words how stress and physical inactivity as well as various types of music affects the life itself, the quality of life and the life period of the human being? Indeed, we have often privately spoken about that, but never in detail in an official wise, which is why I think that this is necessary once, Therefore, I ask openly for that.
As is well known to you, a stressful mode of life, not only due to work overload, but also in every other respect, and a physical movement, inactivity, as well as jealousy, strife, grief, hatred, and discord, etc. has an affect very badly on the entire body and often even rather maliciously. And indeed, on the one hand, due to psychosomatic, as well as ultimately also due to affective sufferings that can lead up to severe chronic illnesses, as well as bodily harms and to heart problems or even to the death, such as through any organ failure. Also, however, a negative and disadvantageful lifestyle otherwise shortens the lifespan, and this can often be years or even decades sooner in which the human dies than would normally be the case. The psyche naturally plays a very important role in the whole thing, because through stressful thoughts and feelings as well as through the poor condition of the body, namely through activity, lessness as well as by stress overload, the consciousness falls to serious disorders, through which it is impaired in its functioning and a weariness of life arises as a result of depression. As a result, thought-feeling-based confusions and pathological consciousness impairments ultimately come about, which also has an impairing effect on the function of intellect and rationality. In turn, originating from this, a life weariness arises, which eventually leads to suicidal thoughts and its carrying out. And now, concerning the different types of music, it must be said that good and positive music elevates the feelings of life and the health, as well as the whole physical and mental state, and accordingly, promotes a good and righteous life attitude and corresponding positive behavior. However, such kinds of music can be found only in harmonious sounds and tones, which on the earth are given only in classical music, as well as in harmonious swinging pop music. What otherwise relates, however, with regard to all discordant sounds and tones, which correspond to nothing other than outrageous and droning noise discharges, as well as the voices concerning only a roaring, jangling, cawing, screaming, howling, and yowling, and so forth, corresponds to a disharmony beyond compare. Naturally, this also yields its malicious and negative effects, which therein reside in the fact that genuine interpersonal relationships no longer come about. Clear order no longer prevails, and the human beings who adhere to this kind of noise-making become indifferent towards their fellow human beings and all life in general. Their senses dull, therefore they also no longer perceive the reality and also can no longer realize thoughts of belonging together. In addition to that and the many other arising damages, the human being drifts off, mostly teenagers and grown-up ungrown-ups, and falls victim to the asocialness. Thus, the life and limb of the fellow human being will also no longer be respected. Consequently, they are brutally confronted, and they are beaten with blows and kicks, and indeed not seldom up to the permanent disability or to the death. There is no more sense seen in the life. Instead, it is senselessly lived only for the day and in pursuit of pleasure, and the thoughts and feelings become cold, mentally incompetent and ill, because the whole thing likewise corresponds to a health-damaging stress, out of which also emerges all the same factors that I initially mentioned with regard to a stressful mode of life. The effects in many cases are also the same, and even up to the suicide.
Behind the whole thing, I still see very much more. The tremendous noise of the present day is arranged with dreadful disharmonic crashing and bellowing, which is crazily referred to as music, has insanely stupid forms, driving right through one's marrow and bones, and unhinges compulsive depression and unsatisfaction, etc. However, not only young but even people of the older generations are not able to understand this. Those who are quite thrilled about the abominable as well as nerve-wracking instrumental and vocal discordance, and no longer have any clue about what sounds really harmonious. The whole thing had begun in the mid-1980s, as even the false emphasizing of words and sentences sprang up and has spread across the world like wildfire. Up to this time, With regard to music, there was only very little that was disharmonious and could not be referred to as music and singing. But then, precisely in the mid-1980s, had that terribleness then suddenly struck. With the instrumental noise, racket and roaring of alleged music, as well as with the bellowing, howling, and yowling of the equally alleged singing. For example, with the false emphasizing of the phrases and words. Similarly, a worldwide phase of the disharmony appeared, which will probably only die down again. When the way is found back to the right intonation and to really harmonious sounds and tones, and therefore also to the really harmony-filled music and to singing of the same kind. But that, I think, will take a long time still, because when I think of what Emmanuel had said, that in the current time and even still into the future, the people will stand up against their authorities, as is also only just happening in the Ukraine and in Crimea and continues to happen, then there is still much evil to be expected. However, as far as I am concerned, I think that the whole unpleasantness concerning the Ukraine is the fault of the EU dictatorship, which flirts with it, in order to also incorporate this state into their dictatorship union.
I also see this in such a way.
Therefore, it can be said that what lies ahead for the earthly humankind is likewise not pleasant, as well as with regard to the malicious consequences that will originate from the worldwide overpopulation, which idiotically and irresponsibly is continuing to breed and always brings new catastrophes upon the humankind. And if I have the sea, excuse me, the telephone.
Give Bernadette my regards. I guess it was something important you had to discuss.
Was it really because of the books Standpunkt, Globetrotter, and Photo Inventarium, which we can pick up in Germany on Friday? There were a number of circumstances surrounding this, so Bernadette had to phone the printer this morning to clarify a few things. But everything is now in order, because the whole thing is now clear and regulated.
Pleasing.
Then I can finish my last sentence, which I had begun before the telephone rang. And when I consider the scenario, that it was, I think, in a private conversation in 1990, had described to me, which can come about in the future with the earthly humankind as a result of the overpopulation and resulting from it, the worldwide destruction of the nature, the fauna and flora, the climate as well as the societal cohesion of the human being, and of the emergence in the breakdown of interpersonal relationships, then I shudder to think. And if I think of what you have said in relation to the depravity of the cultural and ethical and moral, conscience, behavior and education-based values of the human being of the earth, who fall concerning all things of the existence and life, and to a total unconcernedness, and even to a hostility against one another, then the present age proves to me that these conditions have already been reached, and now progresses rapidly further. Additionally, you have said that this is the beginning of the downfall of society, and even could lead to the downfall of humankind, if all the terrible things would not be changed. You have thereby spoken of a period of about 200 years earlier, or later, that these disasters arise, if the earthlings will not find a way back to the effective values of the life and existence, especially also that the overpopulation is stopped and the mass of humankind is normalized through a worldwide birth stoppage. But you have also said that the greater the overpopulation will be, the faster could the disaster appear, and see here in this 20-minute article, since clever people from NASA speak within the same framework. Apparently there are still some rational people who study something more than all those blockheads who suggest that the Earth could still endure more humans, or that all the warnings related to the destruction of the climate and all other bad things are only dark paintings from merchants of doom and world improvers, and were pulled out of thin air. It is not recognized how effectively bad it already is with everything, and that it is slowly but surely approaching the abyss, which can hardly be escaped, because already for quite some time, the Earth is no longer able to bear the great mass of humankind and all the destruction in the nature, the climate as well as with the fauna and flora and so forth, which has been wrought through the guilt of the humans on the planet. Hence, it rears up with primeval natural disasters, diseases and pestilence, and with life-threatening changes. But there are nevertheless those wrongly thinking who believe that everything will go on within the same framework, and that the human of the earth could bethink themselves and stop everything. because they are capable of learning and cooperating, as also is stated here in this article. Actually, however, it is so that nothing and in no wise is anything really done, and nothing will change for the better. Because effectively only through this, that the humankind is reduced through a radical and worldwide controlled birth stop, can the problems of the destruction be stopped. Namely, only as a result of sinking all the destructive machinations which act naturally destructive and planet destructive, as well as climate destructively. Also, the energy and resource consumption can only be stopped through the reduction of humankind, as well as the chemicals contagion, which are blown out through the poisons in the air and will poison fruits and vegetables as well as all other plants, and also the worlds of the insects, birds, fish, animals, and other creatures. Also the detrimental globalization and everything associated with it. The spread of diseases, epidemics, plants and animals and other creatures into the whole world, whereby much terribleness is wrought, can only be stopped through a reduction of the humankind. Also, the refugee flows from those humans who turn their backs on their homelands for political or economic reasons and enter en masse into the industrialized countries, as also the foreigner, and racial hatred as well as religious hatred and the acts of terrorism and acts of war would be reduced. Besides which, all other rampant problems would subside, so everything could be regulated, which has become so fraught with danger today that actually the whole of humanity threatens to go to meet its end. Moreover, it is so, if once more I will allude to this article here, that even in the present time and the time to come, civilizations can disappear, as has always been the case since time immemorial, in which case the earlier humankinds, as will be coming, if the right and rational thing is still not finally done, likewise always themselves carried blame for the fact that their cultures went under. Even back then, you have said that the whole thing actually had an indirect connection with the false emphasis and the dreadful noise and howling, when in the middle of the 1980s, everything had arisen and still rages in the present day, out of which the human being has changed more than ever before, to the evil, negative, and bad, thus also in relation to unscrupulous Gewalt and coercion. You have explained that this was a sign of the times and of the beginning and henceforth incessantly progressive decay of all cultural, moral and ethical as well as educational and behavioral-based values, as well as the worldwide emergence of political, military, economic, family and social disorder, etc. And as you had said, the steadily increasing quarrels in the family as well as true family tragedies proves that this is in fact so, as well as the Ausartungen, in the wise that unsuspecting human beings will be attacked, thrashed, beaten up, robbed, and murdered. And that everything is so ausgert also follows from the events that Emmanuel had predicted, namely that the peoples rise up against their authorities, but act themselves not better, but just as murderous and criminal as those who fight them into the upper rows. There is enough evidence for this around the world, because in each country in which the government was overthrown, nothing better came afterwards. The fact is that when a despotic authority was driven out, the next dictatorship arose from it. Unfortunately, it is such that a human being, when he or she is placed at the helm of the government, immediately allows their cravings for might to run free, and therefore continues driving in the same or an even worse style than was the case with the previous authority. And what the mightful ones in certain countries still afford themselves, other than the uncorrectnesses up to the corruption, prostitution and political murders, therewith also privately or through their power, proves in connection with the ongoing scandals of certain state leaders and other people in leading political situations who crawl around and thereby at the expense of the taxpayers squander away their hard-earned tax money. In Switzerland, we can still be satisfied concerning this, because so far, actually, such scandals are not worth mentioning, contrary to what certain governors and parties afford themselves in relation to the EU, and this sneaking in from behind and trying everything so that Switzerland shall be a member of this human rights despising, freedom hostile and the human being total monitoring dictatorship. So ask yourself how stupid and dumb these EU advocates actually are, that they do not recognize the true dictatorial structure of this union.
What should I say in addition, because you hit the core of the whole thing? It was actually in 1990, namely on the 26th of April, when we had spoken about these things. And the article here, well, regarding the whole thing, some Earth humans seem to slowly begin to think.
Actually, I did not expect any answer. But I think that once again the whole thing should be openly said.
Which can never be wrong and also cannot harm anything.
I also think so. But you still wanted to discuss some things with me, if I understood correctly.
That is so, yes, but I want to talk about it in a private way.